So now that we're fully into the swing of Season 1, most people are either continuing to gear their mains where they're probably at the point of starting to upgrade a lot of gear, or a lot of people have also started to play one or multiple alts. And all of this means that you're going to need a lot of upgrading materials, and the main upgrade material that's used on upgrades no matter what gear track it's on, no matter how high item level that gear is, are Valorstones. And in this video, I want to go over what is the best Valorstone farm currently in the War Within. Now, this is going to allow you to get 25 Valorstones in around 2 minutes, and that timer will go up or down depending on how geared your character is, and more specifically, how much single target DPS you can put out. So if you're more geared, this could take quite a bit less than 2 minutes, and if you're lesser geared, it may take a bit longer than that. This is going to revolve around running a specific delve, so your Brann's level is also going to play into this, but a lot less than a lot of people may think. And this is going to revolve around farming Zekfir. And if you haven't faced off against Zekfir yet, this is basically the end delve in Season 1. And all this delve is one singular boss. That's why being able to put out as much single target DPS as possible is going to allow you to do this farm much more quickly. Now, Zekfir's Lair has two different difficulties. One is just a question mark, and the second one is, I think, 2 question marks. We're going to be farming the first difficulty. Now, to unlock this, you're going to have to go through normal delves and get up to tier 8, because the first difficulty of Zekfir's Lair is technically on tier 8 as well. So once you unlock tier 8, you can go to Azj-Kahet, you can go to Zekfir's Lair, and you'll be able to just infinitely farm him. Another really good thing about this being a delve is that there's no lockouts. So you could go farm this for 6 hours if you really wanted to. Now, even on slow characters, maxing out your Valorstones won't take more than like 3 hours, but you never have to worry about being locked out of doing this farm. And what we're going over in this video is going to be a solo farm, so you don't have to worry about being able to get in a group or anything like that. Anytime you need Valorstones, you can very easily head here and farm as many as you need. Now, because this boss fight is the equivalent to a tier 8 delve, it can be difficult, but because of how the fight actually plays out, a lot lower item levels can do this farm. I've been seeing people around 580 item level be able to farm this pretty consistently without dying or having any major issues. Now, obviously, someone at 580 is going to do it much slower than someone at 590 or 600, but if you're able to go in here at 580 and consistently farm it, that's incredibly strong, especially for newer characters or alts you're trying to gear up, because when you're first starting to gear up an alt with how easy it is to get those first couple crests, you're just going to be flying through Valorstones. So being able to do this farm at lower item level is pretty important. And this boss fight itself is incredibly simple. There's only a few abilities you really have to look out for, and pretty much everything that can deal damage to you is just something you have to get out of the way of. So this boss is going to have multiple abilities that hits in a large cone in front of them. Just walk out of that. Very simple. He's going to have an AoE around him, a purple AoE that if you stand in it, you get feared. Now, this ability doesn't do a ton of damage, so if you have fear breaks and let's say you're melee or something like that, specifically like a warrior, you could just tank it. It's not going to do much damage and you'll be able to get even more DPS uptime. But then there's 2 main abilities you have to look out for. One of them is an interruptible cast that the boss will cast on you. This will put like an 18-second dot on you that does pretty decent damage. Now, if you have something that can remove this dot, including things that can remove impairing effects, it shouldn't be too difficult. Like if you're playing a paladin, Blessing of Freedom will remove this dot as well. So if you're any class that can remove this, it's very easy. You don't even have to worry about interrupting it. If you're not one of those classes, just interrupt it. And also keep in mind, Brann can also interrupt, and Brann will interrupt a lot of these casts as well. You usually don't have to worry about interrupting when Brann's going to interrupt, because he'll usually do it almost instantaneously. So just wait like half a second before you interrupt to make sure if Brann's going to interrupt, he can do that. The second thing you have to look out for is that one of the boss's abilities will summon a web that you have to kill within a certain amount of time. If you don't kill this web, a spider pops out that will do a lot of damage and constantly fear you. You don't want that to happen. For most classes, if you let that spider spawn, 1, you're probably gonna wipe. But good news is this web doesn't have a ridiculous amount of health, and it has a very long cast time or a very long summon time. So just make sure to switch to that target, or if you have good AoE, you can just stand by that target and you should be completely fine. And also keep in mind that the spider shares the health with the web. So let's say you've done like 90% of the web's health and then the spider spawns, the spider will only have that 10% life left. So if you just make sure to focus the web a little bit, you should be completely fine. Now, Brann's going to play a pretty big role in this fight, especially if you're much lower geared, and there's a handful of options you have to make this fight substantially easier. Now, first off, is just you can go level Brann. The best way to level Brann is just to go complete bountiful delves on any alt you possibly can. My Brann's currently only at level 46. You can get Brann up to level 60, and every additional level you get on Brann, he just does more damage or more healing. So if you have a high level Brann, he's just going to be much more useful in general. Now, if you're on a character that's going to need healing or additional support to stay alive, make sure to keep Brann on healer. So if you're like a 580 eye level character, definitely keep it on healer. This is one of the main ways where characters that low eye level can very easily farm this boss, because even if you're taking a good bit of damage, you can just pick up a few of these potions and Brann will also heal you in other ways and you'll be completely fine. If you're a character that has much more self-sustain, or you're a tank, or you're something like a rat paladin, you can switch Brann over to damage dealer. Now my Brann at level 46 can do around 200,000 consistent DPS. So damage dealer Brann is actually very good. That's compared to maybe 40,000 DPS as healer. So if you get to the point where you don't need Brann as a healer, make sure to use him as a damage dealer. It'll help you clear this much more quickly. Now for Brann's items, you have a handful of options. Now if you can stay alive easily just with Brann as a healer and you want the most optimal items for damage increases, you're first going to be using the porcelain arrowhead idol. This will just cause all of Brann's abilities to have a chance to weaken the target, increasing the chance to crit them. And at rank 4 out of 4, this is a 50% increased crit chance on that target. So that's a massive damage increase anytime this procs. But then if you're still having difficulties surviving, say you're really low geared, you can either use a light touched idol. So when you use a defensive, so every 30 seconds, so when you use a defensive, you'll get a heal over time that heals you for 4% of your max life every second for 10 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. That's a lot of healing. Or you can also use Unbreakable Iron Idol, which when your health drops below 40%, the idol will awaken, it'll deal some damage, and then it will taunt the boss for 10 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. That can be very helpful if you're just getting beat up by the boss. That'll drop in, taunt the boss off you for a bit. And then for your second item, if you're just looking for DPS items, the main one is Amorphous Relic. Now what this does is when you enter combat, it'll either make you massive or miniature. Both of these will give you a buff that's up the entirety of the time you're in combat. That's why this is used so much, because it has 100% uptime. So if it makes you massive, it'll increase your size, your max life, and your damage and healing. Keep in mind, this is a rank 4 out of 4 as well. If you're miniature, it'll reduce your size, increase your movement speed, and your haste. So either of these is going to be a pretty massive increase in survivability and your DPS output. You could also use Time Lost Relic. Now I think this is going to be better for dot classes. What this does is Brann will randomly put down this big field that basically buffs up everything you do. And at rank 4, this is 30% for 12 seconds. And this will buff your casting speed, your move speed, the tick rate of your periodic effects, your cooldowns, and your attack speed. So pretty much everything you're doing will be buffed by this. This is like an ultimate version of heroism. So some dot classes or maybe some much more bursty specs could potentially make better use of Time Lost Relic. But I think generally, if you're high enough item level to kill this boss, even if you need Brann as a healer, just use Porcelain Arrowhead and Amorphous Relic, and that'll generally give you the best possible items. And a really good upside of doing this farm is that since this is considered a tier 8 delve, completing this will go towards your Great Vault. And since tier 8 delves are the highest delves you need to do to get the best gear from your Great Vault, just doing runs of this will fill up your Great Vault with 616 item level gear. So that's on the hero track. That'll be incredibly strong for any alt characters, even your mains, because there's some really good items from delves. First off, you can just get random rolled stats. So you could get just best in slot items. You could even get items that are technically better rolls than items you could say get in like Mythic Plus dungeons. And then there's also some other really good items. Specifically, one of the trinkets you can get out of delves is ridiculous. It was used by a lot of the world first raiders. It is yet to be nerfed, so it's still an incredibly strong trinket that you can also get in the Great Vault just from doing this farm. And if you want to completely fill up your vault for open world stuff, you have to do 8 of these runs, and that will give you the 3 616 options for the open world section of your Great Vault. A very easy way to fill up all of those rows on your vault. But that's pretty much the entirety of this farm. And keep in mind, if you're a lower geared character or you want to farm this even faster, you can use consumables. You could use flasks, you could use potions, you could use buff food. Anything you could use in like normal raids or dungeons, you're able to use in here to buff yourself up even more. This is also going to be even better if you're a class that has heroism. Every handful of runs, you're just going to get a run that's going to be much faster because you can just pop heroism. So there's also a bunch of ways to make this farm even faster. But that's all I wanted to go over, so thanks for watching.